Nobody ever explained to me that every 30 days, so on day 29, you're essentially becoming a bank.
In order to account for that from a buyer's perspective, a broker's perspective, you end up having to do what's called an overpack, right?
The way we always do things versus you backing up and saying, hold on a second, is this the fastest and smartest way we could do it? Welcome to Outsource to Profits. I have a fantastic guest because I'll bet you've never heard about the operational efficiency of the fishing industry. Brad, can you tell us what you do and how you save the world one fish at a time?
So, our company is ClearTalley, and basically we do solutions, traceability, and automated logistics for the seafood industry. And the company came about just having literally worked at sea myself and in the fishing industry and looking at taking a different approach and looking at the inefficiencies throughout each stage of the seafood supply chain, all the way from the ocean floor right straight through to the customer's plate. And, in that, it was really eye-opening, right? Like there's a lot of points that you pick out, and in the seafood industry for so many years, the business model has been based around, we've done this for 40 years and that was it. There was no looking at change. It's not like sort of the SaaS market or the more higher tech areas where, it's constantly looking for that next thing or that next efficiency or that next profit margin or whatever it is. It was just, this is how we do it and that's how we're going to continue to do it. And it was really with, the countries changing in international regulations to say, look, where's your seafood coming from? That a lot of these companies have started to look back and say, hey, wait a minute, where is it coming from? And in that, you find these inefficiencies that are huge. And that's really what the entire business is based on.
And this is fantastic. You've probably heard the old adage. So imagine if and I'm going to tell a story around this. If you live in Sydney, Nova Scotia, if you were to fly a plane from Sydney, Nova Scotia, as an example, to Dublin, Ireland, and that plane was off by 1 degree, it wouldn't land in Ireland. It would land in Morocco. And I'll tell you, in my first agency, so I've owned 3 agencies. In my first agency, we started winning giant enterprise customers, Microsoft, Oracle, Intel, these big software companies. And I allowed the customer to dictate what was normal to them. They kept saying, well, I'm going to pay you net 30. And then others would say net 45 and then net 60. And then Oracle would say net 90. And I just took it for granted that was normal course of action. Nobody ever explained to me that every 30 days, so on day 29, you're essentially becoming a bank. If anyone listening to this, if you ever allow a customer to pay you 30 days or later, you have just become a bank. Because you are now creating negative working capital. You're essentially funding payroll and operational expenses to fund the work you're doing for somebody for 30 days, only to collect the money a month later. And the bigger you get, the bigger the problem compounds. And as we got into millions and millions of dollars, I woke up and I was $1 million in debt because I couldn't afford to be that bank. And these simple operational efficiencies in my third agency, I only allow customers to pay by credit card. It's called days sales outstanding, 0 days. So I'm using positive cash flow. The more we sign, the faster we grow, the bigger we get. So with that, Brad, do you mind outlining, you can either take 3 examples or a singular example. And you said something really profound. The only way for you to have been able to see all the inefficiencies of the space was you spend 40 years in it and you see how much a lot of it is like folklore and just like the way we always do things versus you backing up and saying, hold on a second, is this the fastest and smartest way we could do it? Can you give a very tangible example of where you saw that particular problem and what you did?
Yeah, so it started. So I've spent the majority of my career in the maritime industry, everything from building superyachts to oil and gas to aquaculture, you name it. And I was working on a factory freezer trawler in the North Atlantic. And having never fished before, like to that extent, right, it was nice because you got to see it from a totally different perspective, right? Like you had questions and things going through your mind that everyone else wasn't asking because they had been doing this for 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
So, and that's really where a lot of this came up. And that's how the whole business started. It was just walking through the factory and my job on board was to maintain that factory and keep that factory running. So, for me, the efficiencies became really important because the more efficient it was, less I had to do. Right. So, but then you start looking at them and you start solving these small little problems. And then you realize there's a lot bigger problem going on here. And, in that industry, there's machinery for, separating bycatch, right? And bycatch is just what you didn't want to catch, right? And so when you have, like, say, shrimp, for instance, and you put out a trawl and you bring back 10 ton of shrimp, right? In there's a certain percentage of bycatch that goes through a bycatch separator. Well, that bycatch separator is not as efficient as it possibly could be. So you lose approximately 10% of actual product that you want out with the bycatch. And while we all like to assume that the bycatch goes back to the wild, it does. It just goes back as microscopic pieces, right? So It's not, you're not reintroducing it to the ecosystem.
And you were saying 10%, and what was that in tons? I want everybody to picture listening. A ton is a car. So how many cars is being fed through the don't want machine? And it's 10% of the don't want machine, which is money out of your pocket being shredded. What is that?
So over the course of a year, that looks about 1,000 ton per large vessel, right?
Giant auto dealership of
cars just gone, and it's basically fish food. So, and that's not including the weight of the bycatch. That's just the product you wanted. So you look at that and you say, okay, well, there's 1,000 tons that I've already caught, right? I've paid for the crew, I've paid for the fuel, I've paid for the boat, and now I've just thrown it away, right? Because the system in place wasn't efficient enough for me to maintain it or hold on to it. The following that, because the system for bycatch separation isn't 100%, you end up with a bit of bycatch in the final product, right? So in order to account for that from a buyer's perspective, a broker's perspective, you end up having to do what's called an overpack, right? Well, that overpack is another 10%. So when you look at one large vessel, right, you're looking at the bigger picture. You have 2,000 ton of product that you're not getting paid for.
And what would that be worth economically at a wholesale and retail level?
Yeah, so I mean, it's hard to tell on a retail level because on the retail side, it can be delivered in so many different products, right? Like you're going to pay a lot more for a shrimp cocktail than you are for a shrimp tray, but it's very different. But on the wholesale side, you're looking at about a $12 million loss a year, not including the fuel for and the grub and the insurance and the time. You have to remember that to catch 1,000 ton, you're looking at anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks, right? So that's 3 to 6 weeks of fuel. And based on the length of time, that's 700 ton of fuel. So if you do the math on that, add that up and you start looking at the numbers. So is it inconceivable to say that by having just one piece of machinery that's not as efficient as it possibly could be, that you're losing anywhere from 12 to potentially, depending on the market of that particular product, 12 to $20 million a year, right? And, and then we looked at other things too. So it was just that part of it. And then it was looking at all of the other inefficiencies, like how come there's no traceability? Like, we're tracking fruits and vegetables and we're trying to track their temperatures, their humidities, all these things. And we do a very good job. But in seafood, we don't. And it's a very difficult problem because of the temperatures that seafood is stored at, which is generally like minus 18 to minus 28. So it's very difficult to monitor these things. So we started putting in solutions and built full traceability from ocean all the way to your plate. And, that reduces recalls. which are not just the cost of the recall, it's the brand loss. And we've all seen that in the food industry of major corporations have completely closed down, gone bankrupt because of a single recall. And yeah, it's just really looking at each part of the supply chain, and that's what we do. And we try to make each part of that as efficient as possible for the fishermen, for the brokers, the processors, the cold storages, the truckers, everybody, all the way down to the wholesale.
And this is so important. And I'd love you to do a bit of a quick session on advice for a founder. So you were talking about everyone from people inside the boat to the warehouse to shipping and logistics. It works the same in every form of business, whether you're a digital business or a hard asset business, manufacturing to SaaS software, all the way to my world, which is agency world, digital. You as the founder are responsible for people that are selling the work, delivering the work, managing the finances, and so forth. So if you were to give a master class to those founders listening, what are the mindset, skill set toolkit? What are some advice you would give those founders to say, you need to dive in and become the customer and become the factory worker to see it all the way from ocean to fork, so to speak, because there's going to be all kinds of these gear losses. Yeah. It's kind of like gears in a car where there's a loss of horsepower in every turn. What advice would you give those founders?
I think a lot of it is, you see startups all the time, and, you don't always have to have worked in an industry in order to solve a problem, right? However, I think there are certain things out there where it's really important that you do have that experience. Like a lot of the entire business model on this, I had a lot of marine experience, but the entire business model of this was based on actually having been in the industry, right? Like I couldn't have done it without having been there. Without feeling the pain every day it was unrelated items to the business model today, but it was things that I had to deal with every day that would have been reduced in my daily work if these things were more efficient, right? So, I think the advice to founders is, like if you're just really starting with an idea, like this, there was no business model in this. I promise you, there was no idea to create a business. Right. This was just literally, here's a problem. I wrote a particular piece of software to solve a problem in a factory. And that was it. It was just for me, just for my day, to make my day better. I didn't realize when I wrote it that everybody else in the world for the last 40 years has been wanting this piece of software. So, and then it was like, okay, now we need a business. But yeah, I think from a founder's perspective, it's just like, you got to get in there. It's not just about asking questions. Like, get your hands dirty. Like, if you really want to solve that problem, and if you look at all of the greats out there that have created some amazing things in the last 10 years or so, what have they done? They've all gone and gotten their hands dirty, right? Like, they're really digging into it. They're finding out what it is. And it doesn't matter. Like, I've got, colleagues and friends in other industries, whether it's heavy machinery or it's even in some of the SaaS models, right? Where they've literally gone into the businesses that they're trying to create this thing for and worked in the business, right? Trying to figure it out. So I don't know if it's a lot of advice so much, but you got to get in there. You got to know your industry, right? You got to know your customer, be your customer.
They invented the TV show Undercover Boss for a reason.
Yeah, it's too.
That is the reason they did it, is the founders were discovering, I've watched some of those episodes and they're hilarious, but they worked at McDonald's or at Blockbuster or whatever it was. And they went, oh my God, is this how you guys are dealing with this? No, this was great. So Brad, how do people get a hold of you? Kind of summarizing your business, recognizing that they're not in the seafood space, but they're in the founder to founder connection business. How do people get a hold of you and how can you help?
I love helping founders, for starters. It's not just in this business. I've had other software businesses. I sold a business in 2007. I love helping people start out, especially the initial stages of them starting. How do you get going? How do you get these things, off the ground? I love helping people. So, a lot of people contact me through LinkedIn initially. And just send me a DM, right? Send me a message. Let me know what you're up against, where you're going. Love to provide the advice, at least that I can, over the last 40 so years of my life, and get them on their way for sure. I think it's an under discussed topic, the starting as a founder. I really do. It's it's a big. I think I mentioned to you in a message one day about it's hard. Like, you got a family, you got a mortgage, you got like whatever it is. It's hard to make that leap, and there's not a lot of discussion behind it, and there's ways to do it, right?
It's hard, and what I always describe to people is, imagine your brain is a computer and you're running antivirus software in the background for 10 years. That's what it feels like being a founder. So you're there, you can still use your computer, but your computer, a portion of that computer or your brain, is running 24 hours a day about your business all day long. It's like McAfee antivirus software all the time.
Always.
So, yeah.
It is.
This was great. Yeah, Brad, thank you so much for being on the show.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. It was great to chat with you.
Thank you.